In this module, we're going to use a cylinder as our primitive object to create an office chair. Along the way, some of the things that you should pick up are how to extrude an object from a primitive shape or an object, how to use the cut tools, how to attach multiple objects together into elements, and we'll also be exploring using the custom coordinates to do some unique things also. So if we go up to our Create Geometry and click on Cylinder under the Standard Primitives, we can go ahead and get started. And in the top viewport, put your mouse in the center and just hold down your mouse button and drag it out. I'd say probably about 1/4 of the screen in size. I'm using a measurement system. Right now mine's set to about 2 foot. It's a little large. When you let go of your mouse button, you can push your mouse forward and it will extrude it out in the 3rd dimension for the cylinder. And go ahead and left mouse click again to end the process. And we'll go over to the modifier panel now and change some of the parameters of our cylinder. For starters, I'm going to change the radius of this down from 2.5 or 2 foot 7.5 foot. I want to change this back down to, say, 0 foot, probably about, and I'm going to say 2 inches in diameter, make it much skinnier. And then under the height, I'm going to change this up to about, I'm going to call this probably about 6 inches. So I'm going to say 0 foot 6, or you can just type in 0.5 and you should get 0 foot 6. There we go. A nice short round cylinder. And we're going to change the height segments here now. We'll change those down to 3. And then the sides, we're going to change those down to 10. Now the reason why we're doing this is because if you ever look at an office chair, they typically have, well, first of all, by using a cylinder shape, we can reduce the count and save ourselves some memory. But besides that, we can also, if you ever looked at a chair, the way it has usually 5 legs that come off of it. This number is dependent on how many legs are coming off your chair. But in this case, we have 5 legs. We also need 5 spaces in between each one of those legs, thus giving us our other 5 segments. So that's how we derive at the number of sides for a minimum that we need for this model. Under cap segments, we want to leave that at 1. Go ahead and hit your Zoom Extents All button, which is the 3D cube with the 4 red squares behind it. Click on that. It should center up your object. If not, hit it again and it should center up at that point. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add an Edit Mesh modifier to this. So under the modifier list, click on the drop down and navigate down to where it says Edit Mesh. At this point you can click on that and that should activate, and we can get into the sub-object mode 2 ways: by clicking on the plus next to Edit Mesh, either by word or down under the selection rollout on the right hand panel. We have icons we can use also. So what we want to do is we want to go into polygon mode for starters right away, and we're going to be working in the perspective mode for this. So click on that viewport to make it active, and let's maximize this viewport for this next step. So click on your min-max tool. Okay, with this viewport maximized now, we can go ahead and we want to click on every other polygon. So in order to do so, we need to hold down the Control key. So click on your Control key and hold it down, and you can single click on one of the vertices, either one. You can also click on that one, either or. What we want to do is select every other one. And with them selected, we're going to navigate down to the viewport tools. I'm still holding down my Control key at this point. And I'm going to click on my Arc Rotate Selected. The Arc Rotate Selected is the white one. If you hold down your left mouse button over it, and it will roll out and you get 3 choices. The Arc Rotate Selected will use your object that you are working on as the pivot point for your arc rotate pivot. And you can go ahead and rotate around your model and try and get to another view here. I'll go ahead and change that up just a little bit. And then right click to end the arc rotate tool, and then continue selecting every other one. Go back to your arc rotate tool, spin around, and again until you can see every other one. Now I want to select this last one. I'll right click to end that, and now I've got all of them selected. Okay, now with all of those selected in the perspective viewport, once you have that, click back on your min-max tool. And the reason why is because it's just a lot easier to watch what's going on here. And we want to use our extrude function now. Now there's two ways you can access this while you're in polygon mode. You can either navigate down to the edit geometry rollout and click on extrude. And then once you do that, you can actually even type out how much you want to extrude. Or you can right click over your viewport, or click over your viewport and hold down your mouse button and just push your mouse forward. Now once you do that, as you can see in your viewports, you'll get 5 branching segments that will come off. Now once we do that, we've got them that have come off. If you look at the bottom of most of these legs, they tend to curve at the end, so we're going to use our bevel tool next. So with them same 5 selected, I'm going to go up to my front viewport, hold down my mouse button and push it forward just a little bit. And then I'm going to scale down those polygons quite a bit. That's a little much, so I'm going to use my scale tool again. Actually just undo that and do it one more time. Oops. Try that with the bevel on and extrude out just a little bit. Let go of my mouse button, it becomes a scale function. And looking in the front viewport, I'm only going to go about a quarter of the way in, and then left click to end the bevel function. And then I'm going to hit my zoom extents all button. Now you'll notice here when it did the bevel, it tapered upward. I can switch now to my move tool, and by grabbing my Y handle on my move tool, I can move them down and line them up so it becomes a flat surface across the bottom here with those polygons. So what that does here, if you look in the perspective view, gives us this nice little taper going on our object. If you wanted to make that more round, of course, you'd probably make it less extreme and just make a lot more of them continuing to taper down until you get it nice and rounded. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to go back to polygon mode, which we're in, and in the perspective view we'll select the very top polygon at the top of the cylinder. And with this one, what we want to do is switch to our scale tool now, and we can go ahead and do a 3D scale on that. In the top viewport, it's probably easiest by selecting the inner band, which is the yellow 3D triangle or yellow triangle. And go ahead and pull your mouse back while you're holding down your left mouse button, and kind of taper that in just a little bit. Remember, this cylinder was only about 2.5 inches, so this would probably bring it down, or about 2 inches, so that would probably bring it down to about 1 3/4 or thereabouts. Maybe a little bit more. Something like about there. That's about 50%. Now we can go back and turn on our extrude button, and we can go ahead and extrude that out just a little bit. And stop that. As you can see, we've got this going on. If you want, you can even push that back down, back in that polygon, so it falls in line with the last polygon that we tapered. Now the function of this is that we can now scale this one down also. Of course, we could have done this with our bevel tool. By doing a 2D scale here now, I create a flat little kind of surface there to extrude out for my actual pipe that I'm going to pull out now. Once I pull that out, I'm going to stop that. Probably about 6.5 inches. I'm just using different methodologies here so you can see how that is. None of them really makes a difference which one you prefer. Whatever your choice may be. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to make the seat out of this. In order to do that, we're still going to use our bevel tool. Now in the top viewport with that top of your pipe selected, I guess you would consider that polygon, we'll go ahead and just extrude that out just a little bit, and then we're going to flare it quite wide. Now I'm looking at my legs of my chair, and I'm going to pull that out probably about, oh gosh, I'd probably say at least 50 to 60%. So you've got something like that. And then now, what I'm going to do, let's hit our Zoom Extents All button so we can examine this next step. And I'm going to use my Arc Rotate button in my perspective view to get a different angle on this. Something like that. Now what we can do is we can, again, using our bevel tool, we'll go ahead and bevel this up just a little bit more. I'm going to raise it up just a little bit, so I've got to bring it back down before I let go of my mouse button. And I'm going to taper this one out just a little bit more. And I'll do it again, just a little bit at a time. So even if it springs forward because of the scale, that's alright. I want to bring it back down. If I have to, I'll use my move tool and bring it back down in that plane. I'm going to scale that out just a little more. I'll do it 2 more times just to create a nice round edge around for a seat. So this one I'm going to leave right in line with the last one and just click on it. I'll bring it up 2 more times, and I'll taper them back inward now to create the roundness of the top. So go ahead and pull that down. Now if it turns out, I can stop along the way and hit my Zoom Extents button. If it turns out that I'm getting too far extruded or whatever, remember I can always scale all these back at the vertex mode. I can go back to vertices, and I can select the whole seat across the whole thing and just do a 2-dimensional scale by grabbing the Y handle and pushing that back down if I need to. I can go back to polygon mode. It should still have my top selected there. At this point I've got some decent roundness going on. I could probably taper it 1 more time, but in our case that would probably be wasted geometry, but I will. I'll do it 1 more time. So I'll just pull that up, push it back down so it's about as much as the last ones, and taper it in. And as you can see, it makes a nice rounded edge for me. So the more edges and tapers you have in there, of course, the more rounded something will be. Once you've got that established, then it's time to move on to creating the extrusions for the pipes that come off the back that hold the back onto your office chair. Now you can do this depending on your chair. If you want to pull them off the back of the seat, or if you want to pull them off the pipe, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to use the chair seat itself, so I'm going to get out of bevel mode by clicking back on it and clicking on one of these side polygons right here, and using my Zoom Extent selected, which if I hold down my left mouse button over my Zoom Extents All, gives me the white 3D cube with the 4 red squares, and it will zoom around my selected face. Okay, the next step is we're going to create the pipes that come off the back, that hold off the back of this. Now you could actually make these coming off the under pipe that holds the whole thing up, or you can pull them off the back of the seat. It's entirely up to you. In my case, I'm going to click on this and select this back flat face here in the front viewport, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically cut some new polygons in here so that I can extrude those out. So as long as we're in polygon mode, we have a new tool to introduce to you. Under Edit Geometry, we have the Cut tool. Now, what this allows us to do is place our mouse over any edge, and we can click on it, and you'll see you get a marquee handle, and wherever you place that, like over a new edge, including invisible edges, it will turn into a plus. And I'm just going to put that on the other side of my selected polygon and click, and then right click to end it. Otherwise it will continue to make more cuts, which is nice when you want to cut custom angles in. So I'm going to do the same thing over here, but if you cut from like the top to the bottom, you may end up with an invisible edge. So it's always best to test it and undo it if you have to and go the other direction. So I right click to end that. Now you'll notice here that vertex showed up kind of in space. That means that I created a new edge going off into nowhere. So I don't want that. I want to undo that. I want to click back on my edge again and place it right about there and right click to end. Now I'll do it one more time over here. Again, do it low enough so that you grab the right edge. If you have to, zoom in. And I'll do it one more on the right side also. And then that's what you should end up with. Now I can get out of cut mode, and if I need to, go back to vertex mode and kind of straighten those out. Maybe push these over a little bit. And the same with the bottom over here. Just kind of straighten them up. And if you want, you can go in and divide your edges right there, which we can do. Click on edge mode. And let's zoom in around those particular edges. And here's a good example of where I've got two vertices kind of overlapping. So what I need to do is weld those together. I'll go back to vertex mode and click on weld target. Select this lower edge or vertex, move it up, and snap them two together. That way I have nice clean geometry. Okay, while I'm down here nice and close up, I'm going to click on edge mode and use my divide tool and divide that edge, this edge, that one, and that one. And then back in vertex mode, I can select those new vertices I just created and scale them out to make more of an octagonal type shape. Using my 2D scale in the front viewport, I'm just push those forward just to make a nice rounded kind of polygon to extrude from. Now we're zoomed in nice and close. I'll just use my pan tool and zoom over. As you can see, those weren't exactly straight. I can straighten those out before I extrude them too. But for today's sake, I'm not too worried about it. Same thing here. While we're in vertex mode, I'll select this vertice, right click and choose move. And I'm just doing this to straighten this up. And then of course I'm going to divide my edges now. So we go back to edge mode, use our divide tool, and then the two red lines we definitely want to divide, and then also the bottom ones that make up this short little square. And if you have to, go jump back to vertex mode. As you can see here, I clicked off the line, so I just created a new vertex out in the middle of nowhere. So I gotta undo that by using Control Z, and then go back to edge mode, and I'll divide that edge one more time. Don't forget your undos, that helps. Click there and try that now. Go to vertex mode, same thing. Undo it. Back to edge mode one more time. And this time we'll put our mouse just slightly below, because apparently there's an invisible edge floating out there. There we go. As you can see, it made a nice cut there. Now those edges will disappear. That's actually an OpenGL thing. So if I click back on that, you can see my vertices I created, and I can straighten these out by moving them up or down with my move tool, and then selecting all four of the new divisions, and use my scale tool. Just kind of scale that out so that I create an octagonal polygon. Okay, now that I've got that, I'm going to zoom out using my front viewport here, and you can see those two polygons we've created. Now we'll go back to polygon mode, and it has our original selection here, so we can hold down Alt and just click right in the middle, and it will deselect the outer one, and then you can deselect those also. So basically all we're after, you can just single click and use Control to grab them. So with those selected, we can now use our extrude tool, and we just put our mouse over one of them, or we can use the rollout next to it. If they're too small, we can use our zoom extents all button and zoom in around them also. Okay, with those polygons now, we want to just to go ahead and extrude those out. Whoops. I'll undo that. Extrude those out just a little bit. And use my zoom extents all. Actually, I'm going to switch to my zoom extents for the whole scene, so I can just kind of use that as my scale reference. Now, when you want to make a curve, what you do is you just make short extrusions, and then as you extrude, so I'm going to zoom around the left viewport, you rotate the polygon. So it's between the rotate and then extrude. Now, a handy way of knowing how to do this is using the shortcut keys. The transform tools are set up with W being the move tool up here. So if I hit W, it will give me that. If I hit E on my keyboard, it will give me the rotate. If I hit R on my keyboard, it will give me the scale tool. So if you hit E, that will give you rotate. And we're going to jump back and forth between extruding and rotating. So starting off with the extrude from our first one, and you can do this just by using your rollout. Just extrude it just a little bit and stop, and then put your right click over the viewport in the left view, and using the outer band, rotate it back. Whoops, excuse me. I'm on a local coordinate. I want to switch that to a view coordinate, and I want to grab that outer band and rotate those at a slight angle, probably about 45 degrees. And then I want to use my extrude tool, and I'll use the rollout again and extrude just a little bit and stop, and right click in my viewport again, grabbing that band and rotate it in about another 45 or so. And it should take about 3 bends to make it around the corner. So back to extrude, a little bit more, about the same length. Right click to go back to my rotate tool, and we'll make this one nice and flat. And then last but not least, we can extrude one more time upward for the upper pipe. And we'll hit our zoom extents all button. As you can see now, we've got 2 decent pipes coming off the back, and they should be coming up straight up and down. Remember, if they're crooked or whatever, you can use your move tool, grab those polygons, and move them around. Oops. In this case, I'll undo to reselect them, and I can kick them back at an angle if I want, or whatever have you. So I'm going to just taper them just to be stylistic. If I need to make this all shorter, I can grab all these vertices, go back to vertex mode here. That's probably easiest. And with those new vertices selected, just move them back. Make sure that you don't have your ignore back facing on. So you select the other pipe too. If you want to shorten it back up, you can move it. Something like that. And last but not least, if we want to make wheels, for example, we can make those in the front viewport. Make another cylinder for that, and just in the left view, just go ahead and make a short little cylinder and extrude it out. Change the segments from 3, well, you can leave it at 3 actually. That'll make our job easier. And let's hit our zoom extent selected, which is the white 3D box with the 4 red squares. And in the top viewport, go to your modifier modifier, and let's add an edit mesh modifier to this small cylinder. This is going to be a wheel, and go into vertex mode. And in vertex mode, we want to select in the top viewport the 2 outer sections. So hold down your control key, draw a marquee selection around the very top vertices and also the very bottom vertices while holding down control. With them selected then, using your scale tool, let's do a 2-dimensional scale in the front viewport. Now, so we don't lose the selection of all them vertices, we want to right click in the viewport to make it active, and then we want to hold on, put our mouse over the outer yellow band on the transform gizmo, hold down your mouse button and pull it back towards you a little bit. You'll notice in the top viewport this will basically create a nice taper for a wheel. Once we've done that, you can let go of your mouse, and we've got our wheel, and now all we need to do is align it. So let's go back to our Zoom Extents All button, which is the gray 3D cube with the 4 red squares. And then what we want to do is get out of sub-object mode, so click on the word Edit Mesh. And then switch to your Rotate tool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this object and rotate it so it lines up with one of these legs. So I'm going to just, and you can do it either direction, so you can rotate it first and then move it, or you can move it and then rotate it. And I'm just going to move it right about there and place it in right about there. And I'm just going to double check it by using my zoom tool here, because I think it's crooked. And if not, I'll just move it in closer in place where it belongs. And then once I'm satisfied with that, now comes the fun part. What we're going to do is zoom back out. And the idea here is what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that wheel so that we can replace it or place it along each one of them. Now we've got a handy little function that allows us to do that. If you switch to your Rotate tool, and we're going to switch to a custom coordinate system. Under where it says View, just 2 buttons over, navigate down all the way in the drop-down list to where it says Pick. This allows us to pick the pivot point of a custom object to use its coordinates. So if we click on the original cylinder which makes up our chair, it will use that pivot point. Now once you click on it, it should change to the name of that object. So up here it says Cylinder 01. Now at this point you can see based on the transform gizmo it's still going to rotate on the local coordinate, even though we have that under our list. Now what you need to do is actually go by that pivot point. So next to that is use the pivot point button, hold down that, and choose the very bottom one, which is use selected pivot point. As you can see, the transform gizmo will now go based upon where our original cylinder was based. All we have to do now is hold down our Shift key, because our wheel is still selected, and we're using the pivot point of our office chair. With the Shift key held down, grab the inner band here and rotate your wheel until it lines up with the next available slot. Now in my case, I've got a bit of a lag here, and when you're holding down the Shift key, the computer tends to mess with it. Okay, and I've still got my Shift key held down. Now once I let go of it, it's going to come up with the clone options. And we want to choose Copy. And under this, we want to change the number of copies to 4. And then when we say OK, it should automatically make your objects, or at least make them relatively close. The last one tends to be off, so you can grab it and then just rotate that last one over. Just because there is probably an offset based on human error when I was eyeballing it. And I can grab a couple more of these and just kind of clean them up. Now, last but not least, for this particular exercise, all we have to do is attach these. And to do that, I'm going to click back on my Move tool and select my office chair again. That should be Cylinder 01. And then now, under the Edit Mesh Rollout, Edit Geometry, we have an Attach and Attach List function. If you click on Attach List, it will come up with all the other cylinders that are available, all of the wheels, and then we can select all of them and click on Attach. Now all of those objects become an element of the main object. So when you go into element mode, you can still select portions of this model, such as each wheel individually, and create a texture for it, but it is still considered part of the whole, such as office chair. Last but not least, we have a back to make for our chair. Now to do that, we can either build that the same way, starting with a cylinder. We can go back to our create function and create a cylinder in the front viewport. Hold down our mouse button and drag that out, and kind of extrude that a little bit, and then hit our zoom extents all button. Actually, zoom extent selected, and in this case, in the left viewport, we want to select the outer vertices and taper those down. So to do that, we're going to go to our modifier list and add an edit mesh. And then we're going to go into sub-object mode vertex, and then I'm going to select the outer band by holding down my control key in the left viewport, just barely crossing over them. Doing the same thing, holding down my control key still and selecting the other side. Now I can let go of my control key once I've let go of my mouse. Now, again, we want to retain our selection in the front viewport. We want to keep it, but we want to scale it and do it in the front viewport. So switch to your scale tool, and then right click in the front viewport so that you keep that selection. Put your mouse over the outer yellow band. Hold down your mouse button and pull it back just a little bit, and it creates a nice little roundness for us. Now all we got to do is make this object a little bit bent, and you can do this in the left viewport by switching back to your move tool and then just drawing a marquee around like the most middle vertices, moving them forward away from the back of the chair, and then grabbing the next set, and then grab the lower one also and push those forward, but not quite as far. And you'll notice it's creating a nice little roundness for us. So first we had those outer ones, then we have the inner ones, and then we have the last ones here. So that kind of creates some roundness, and then hopefully use our perspective view, kind of rotate that, and you can kind of see, especially from that angle, we're creating that kind of roundness that a chair would have. Once you've got your shape you want, this is not bad. I can get out of sub-object mode, maybe do a little customizing, maybe use a non-uniform scale in the front and make it kind of more oval shaped, and then maybe even use my rotate tool in the left view. And I'm going to get out of this. It's still kept the cylinder, so I'm going to switch it back to view, and I'm just going to rotate it just a little bit so it kicks a little bit back. And then last but not least, I want to attach it to the office chair. So I'm just going to move it back where I want it, where it looks like the two objects become one. And I can check that in my perspective as see where the solid starts to disappear or it comes really close. That's good enough right there, and at least for now. And then I'll go to my attach, and I will attach the office chair. I'll click on my zoom extents all, and there we have an office chair. It's a little bit out of proportion with the back a little bit. I could continue adjusting that at this point. It still is an element, so if I go into element mode, I can select on that object and even do a non-uniform scale on it some more, maybe under X, or even do a 2D scale. And then move it up, switch back to my move. Move it up a little bit. And so I can continue working on that. I can actually detach that back off as an object. There's a detach function under edit geometry also. So that concludes this module. If you click on File, Save As, save this as Box Model Office Chair.